Welcome back, friends, to the Heart of a Disciple podcast. This is episode 2. I'm Lisa Martinez, the founder of Little with Great Love Restoration Ministry and the producer of this podcast series on discipleship based on the book with the same name by my friend Bob.
The Heart of a Disciple podcast was made possible by the generosity of the following sponsors.
Hello, I'm Carol Passioni, and on behalf of the Mark D. Passioni Foundation, we are excited to sponsor this series of podcasts on The Heart of a Disciple by Bob McCarty. The Mark D. Passioni Foundation, through its Shine On grants, supports pastoral ministry to the young church. My husband, Mark, gave his entire life to the church, and he and Bob were close friends and colleagues in the Archdiocese of Baltimore and at the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry. Indeed, Mark had the heart of a disciple. His love of the church and his passion for ministry gave witness to his commitment to discipleship. May these podcasts and Bob's book support and challenge you on your spiritual journey. And please visit the Passioni Foundation website for more information about our grant process.
It's a pleasure to be back. And what could be more fun than talking about my book? I mean, really, it's like, but I have to say to Lisa and Tammi how this is still a really humbling experience. I just want to say right up front that I've been in ministry a very long time, and to write about spirituality and the spiritual journey is kind of personal and kind of vulnerable, and it's a little bit humbling. So kind of a pleasure to be sharing it with you guys. Thanks.
Thanks for being back with us, Bob. And we also have with us Tammi McCarthy. Welcome back, Tam.
I am super excited to be here for round 2. I'm Tammi McCarthy. I'm over at Whispers of Love and Faith, where I share a little bit about the whispers of the Holy Spirit. And I'm excited to kind of be with these two today as we kind of go through Bob's book and just share some of the beautiful insights that he's given us in discipleship. So if you haven't already, I just really encourage you to listen to episode 1, where we discuss the premise of this podcast, because today we are just jumping right on in to our discussion on this book. So
Yeah, exactly. So in this episode, we're going to be covering a few key points from chapters 1 through 4. This is going to be in your book. So if you have a copy of the book, please go grab it, follow along. If you still need to purchase a copy, you can go to pauluspress.com. You can stop by your local Catholic bookstore. You can get it from Amazon. If you don't have the book, that's okay. You can. You're welcome to be a disciple who listens. Bob's like, what are you talking about? You can come as you are. But something also super cool that we've done, guys, is we've made a Heart of a Disciple journal that is in our littlewithgreatlove.com/shop online. And it's super handy because it stays on theme while also supporting our ministry. So it can make a nice little set, and you can keep all of your journal questions that we give you for each chapter. You can write about them. And then you can keep journaling about discipleship or whatever the heck you want, or use it for notes, however you do. All right. So as you listen or watch, just know that we're going to list the key chapters that we're talking about, the key points for the chapters in the show notes, as well as on the blog at littlewithgreatlove.com, where we're going to have blogs for each one of these episodes. So let's begin, Bob. We're going to talk about chapter 1, which is a disciple's heart. And kind of kick us off here with what you're talking about at the heart of this chapter, this hunger for the holy, I think you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I am. I'm convinced, despite what we read sometimes, especially in the secular press, but increasingly in the religious press, about people walking away from denominational religion. I'm convinced that there's this hunger for the holy that I think is embedded in our soul at our birth, at creation. And I think that hunger for the holy impels us to always to move towards, to journey towards, to want to be reconnected with the Creator. Now the issue for me is people use a variety of language to talk about that hunger. And I think that's an important acknowledgement right at the beginning here, because language significant, but we're talking about a reality that's bigger than any language, that God is bigger than any words that we use. And I think that ought to impel us to a degree of humility. It ought to impel us to a degree of being willing to listen to people's stories with a different ear that says, how do I hear their search coming through? So I think in the very first chapter, try to lay that out, that there's this hunger, and people are talking about that in different ways or responding to that hunger in different ways. I think it all makes up part of the spiritual journey.
And I think that this idea of mystery and transcendence is what makes the world so beautiful, right? I mean, without these things, then it's just so humdrum and dull. And I love how you say that it should translate into how we listen to other people, how we encounter other people, right?
It's like, Lisa, like an example would be, I think that scientists today are the new mystics.
Mm.
I think scientists today, and I've been fascinated by the discoveries from the Hubble telescope. I just can't believe what scientists are finding, and they're really wonderful at always asking the great why question, and what else, and what's next. And so they know that they're dealing with this infinite reality that is beyond all their questions. I think we live in that kind of a universe. And I think we struggle for the words to talk about our experience of the transcendent, of mystery, of God. And but words is what we have. And so we struggle with that. Um, but it's the image I used in the book about being experience rich and language poor. I really believe we are experience rich when it comes to the experience of God, but oftentimes we don't have the language to talk about it. We're language poor. And so why are there so many books written about spirituality? Why wouldn't just one be enough? Because God's bigger than any of this words. Why are there 4 gospels, not one? One gospel couldn't hold the story of Jesus. I mean, so this idea that words is what we have, but words inherently are limiting. And yet we continue on the journey. We continue to struggle because we have to, because this is an experience that demands expression and sharing with others.
So I love that line that you have in the book where you say we are experience rich and language poor. And the reason I love that is because I think when it comes to evangelization, oftentimes we feel like if we don't have the perfect way to say something, we won't say nothing at all. And I see this with my own teenagers who oftentimes stumble over words when they're trying to share their faith with their friend. And, they'll come to my husband and I and they're like, Mom, what would you say? And essentially, Bob, what they're saying is, give me the words.
Yeah.
Give me the language because I know how I feel about my faith, but give me the words so that I can speak it in a way that it will touch someone's heart, right?
Yeah. And Tammy, and here's the other part of that. When I use the word language, when I use that term language, I think I'm referring to more than just the spoken word. One of the gifts, I think, of Catholicism is our rich ritual tradition. So in Catholicism, when we gather together for worship, when we gather together for liturgy, for prayer, for adoration, for any of that, we gather together and we know that words are not enough. And so we use symbol and we use movement. We use, as Catholics, we are famous for stained glass and statues and oil and water and ashes. We use all of it. We use all of it. Why? Because God is bigger than any words. Sometimes we just need more than words. So language is, I think language is broader, but we're hungering for that.
Yeah.
I think we're hungering for those different ways. If you need a practical example, think of people in love. And one of the things that I've said before, if you had to guess at what theme has had the most songs ever written about it, everybody guesses love. And do you think we're finished writing songs about love? No. What does that tell us? Is that there are dimensions to love that are innumerable, that we're still going to have more songs. And think about people in love and think of how you express love. It's not just words, but think of the actions that go with that. That's all part of that language of trying to express something that I think at times it's bigger than words, but we're experience rich. But that language, sometimes we're just language poor. We need help with the language.
Yeah, I love that you also were talking about these practical experiences. Talk to us a little bit about Belayers and that community element that you bring in through this image of Belayers. And what is that? What does that mean for people who aren't rock climbers?
I think this search for God has at least these two dimensions. There's an individual search for God, me and God, but there's a communal dimension to this. Me and my neighbor, and I'm using neighbor in the broadest possible way of the people of God searching to, moving towards reconnecting with their creator. And so there's a personal journey here, but there's a communal journey here. And why? It's because my experience of God is not big enough. It's like I want to travel with others. I want to hear about their experience of God because it enriches my experience. And one of the things I like about being Catholic, our whole image of the communion of saints, is that when we think about traveling with others on this journey, these companions on the spiritual journey, we are not talking just about the here and now, although that's obviously a significant element. But we travel with all those who went before us. In the Catholic world, we call it tradition with a capital T. We take it that seriously. So we are a people across time traveling towards this urge to reconnect with the creator. And there's something about that image of being part of that transcendent journey. It is just flat out incredible. It's overwhelming. But boy, what a great journey. What a great journey to be on.
I think I love that concept, the fact that you've used the word belayers. And I have to be honest, you'll never find me ever using that equipment in life. Not, but I love the fact that there's this line on page 9 where you say the bond of trust between climbers and belayers is profound.
Sorry. All right, Tammy. So we'll never climb. Okay, I kind of get that. All right, that was pretty clear. Nothing subtle about
I can
that.
trust you, Bob. We're gonna have to find a different way to go about that, creating that trust.
But I will say that anyone who's ever rock climbed, whether it's in a gym, but I would say most especially out of the gym and in nature itself on a rock face, you know the importance of having belayers. You know the importance of being attached to that climbing rope and trusting the person who's holding your line. Because what that allows you to do is to move forward, to risk, to get off the ground, to get on the climb, and to keep going. Because I think that without that sense of security, we would be really hesitant to put ourselves at that kind of risk. Because that's why rock climbing is so exciting, because there's a risk involved. There's always that you're always living in that tension between joy and abject fear and terror. It's kind of fun. but the role of the belayer is critical in rock climbing. So it's worthwhile for all of us to think about who are the belayers in our life. Who are those people that we journey with? Who are those people who kind of hold our safety line, who allow us to take risks, allow us to move forward? Who are those who will catch us if we fall, who will comfort us, support us, soothe us? I mean, who are those people? And this is the related flip side of that. I think it's very worthwhile for all of us to consider, who do we belay? See, I really do think we all belay someone. We may not use that kind of language, but I know we're experience rich when it comes to being the belayer for others who are on that journey, whether it's family members, sometimes it's our own children, it's our friends, it could be neighbors, it could be people, if you're involved in church ministries, the folks to whom and with whom you minister. And oftentimes it's people that we may not even know by name, and we wind up being belayers for them. So I think that whole image of who belays us, it allows us to risk. And whom do we belay? And we allow them to move forward in their journey, their climb. Who are those people for us?
I've told you guys that you've both been belayers for me, and I think that you guys are going to get a lot out of chapter 1. We are, these are just tidbits from the chapters so that you guys can go back and go further. So we are going to move on into chapter 2 now. But that image, to that way to end the chapter, was really profound for me, because I have rock climbed before. And so I do understand the importance and the trust that it takes for that. So chapter 2, Bob, you start off by pointing out a great distinction here. Tourist versus pilgrim. Can you give us the difference?
Yeah. Chapter 2 is titled A Path with a Heart. And part of what I'm trying to capture here, remember, we're using images and metaphor to try to understand the spiritual journey. So all this is my attempt to put some of this into words for my understanding. And if it helps somebody else find some language, that's terrific. But on that path, I think there's two different ways of looking at the path. Are we a tourist or are we a pilgrim? And I think they're two very different realities. We've all had the experience of being a tourist. I've been a tourist, and I love the idea of visiting new places. I love learning about new places. I love just meeting new people. I love sightseeing. I am enthralled with the national park system. I've had the chance to travel quite a bit of the world. I've been to Everest and Antarctica. It's like I love being a tourist. But the pilgrim, it's different. Whereas the tourist, I think, it's me interacting with the outside world. The pilgrim is internalizing that journey on the inside world, the inner world. I think there's a real difference between being a tourist and being a pilgrim. The tourist is more concerned about the external destination. I think the pilgrim is more aware of the internal journey itself, and what is this experience telling me. So folks who've been on retreat, that's an experience of pilgrimage. If you've actually done a real pilgrimage to either one of the holy sites here in our country or somewhere around the world, you know what it's like to be a pilgrim. Pilgrims treat the experience differently. And I think one of the differences for pilgrims is that it's not the experience alone that has power. It's the reflecting on the experience that has power. That's a critical point. That is not just doing something, but what pilgrims do is they pause and reflect on the experience they've just had or that they're having, and they're figuring it out. What does this mean for me here and now? How does this impact my spiritual journey? And I would hope when we are pilgrims, we're always asking the question, where is God in this? What is the Spirit telling me? Where is the Spirit leading me? So the reality is, I think pilgrims see differently. It's that spiritual journey that's internal, that feeds the soul. So it has a different focus, a different purpose. It may look like the same reality, but our perception of that is very different. The pilgrim's perception is very, very different. I really believe this, that if we're not careful, and I think this is one of the traps in our culture, if we're not careful, we can become experience junkies. I bet we've all met people who seem to collect experiences. They do all kinds of things. And at the end of those things, those events, those experiences, they're still the same person. I think if we're not careful, we can do that to our own children. We can involve our young people in so many activities that they become experience junkies. They just collect the activities. It's the process of reflecting that changes it from tourist to pilgrim. We move from experience junkie to we allow that experience to change us. We are different because of the pilgrimage.
I was going to share, Lisa and I recently returned from the National Eucharistic Congress. And, when we both kind of got off the plane and we were sharing what our intention was at this Congress, we had a very similar conversation to this, which is what, our conversation looked like. I don't have an itinerary. I don't have an itinerary of what I want to see. I just want to show up and I want to see what God puts in front of me. And I want to see how I'm supposed to experience this Eucharistic revival in my own heart and take this back into the ministry work that I do. And
Yeah.
I think to your point, Bob, when you're looking at things as a tourist, you kind of have this little scavenger hunt. It's like, I'm going to see this, then I'm going to see this. There's expectations that you can set. You can decide that this is only successful as a travel destination if I have seen everything worthwhile.
Yeah.
And I think when you go into it with a pilgrim mentality, there's no expectations. You're really saying to the Lord, like, what are you going to place in front of me? And how is it going to move me?
I think your point is really well taken, Tammy. I really do. It's how do we go into an experience? And I suspect that two people having the same experience, one goes through it as a tourist, one goes through it as a pilgrim. You could see it at the Eucharistic Congress. You can see it at youth conferences. You can see it at retreats. You can see it. You can see it at any of our Catholic holy sites around the world. You can see it in our own parish.
Yeah, so
Because I
true.
think that going to mass in our own parish can be a pilgrimage. We depending on our mindset, are we a tourist who's just checking off the boxes, or are we a pilgrim entering into the experience and allowing the experience to change me? I think what a difference. We're called to be pilgrims on the road.
Yeah. And as pilgrims, you talk about these two paths. And I just want to make sure that in this chapter too, this is such a beautiful image when you talk about this outward and the inward path. What are the differences between these two trails? A journey is one thing, but it comes more intimate when it becomes a path, right?
Yes. Yeah. Because we're both on the outward and inward. Think of it this way. The outward path is what other people see.
Hmm.
People can see the relationships we form. They can see the jobs or the vocations we choose. They can see how we treat others. They can see, they can see what we buy and don't buy. I mean, do you see that the outward path is visible to those around us, and that's really important. But I think that the real key, does our outward path reflect our inward path? The inward path is a different reality. That's the place in our heart. And I keep using that image of heart. That's the place in our heart where we encounter the transcendent. We encounter mystery. We are alone with God. There are no external trappings there. God knows us for who we are genuinely. He knows who we want to be. God knows. And so that inward journey. And I always think that the challenge, and it's a lifetime journey. This is not something, I think I'll do this by Sunday. No, this is it's a lifetime journey to blend our inward and outward paths. And that the outward path, we want that outward path to reflect our inner path.
Mm.
And I think that's where integrity comes from. I think that's where wholeness, wellness, I think that's where completion comes from. I think it's that reconciliation where our outward and our inward path reflect each other. And I think that's where joy is. I think that's where joy comes from for us.
I love that. You're saying these two paths merge, right? And that it either brings harmony or discord to our life. And what really makes a difference is listening to our hearts, getting in touch with the inmost self, right? To help us better understand that path that we're going through, right?
So, and Lisa, people have had this experience without calling it that. Again, the experience rich. Think of yourselves, anybody who's listening. Think of times you've been in a job where you knew that it was time to move on, that there was a sense of dis-ease, not disease, but dis-ease. You know that there was this inner voice saying, "I'm being called to something else." It could be in a job, it could be in a relationship. Some people it's geographic, time to be somewhere else. but that sense, that inner sense of, I can feel it.
Yeah.
I can feel it. And then that's where the spiritual skill of discernment comes in, to take the time to reflect on that feeling, to reflect on that insight, to reflect on that urging, to reflect on that through the lens of faith, through the presence of the Holy Spirit, to say, where am I being led here? And so, and I think that's part of that inner journey moving to the outer journey.
That's perfect. It's a great way to sum that up as we move into chapter 3 here. And so we're going to go into a heart for ministry. Man, you talk about something in this chapter, this heart sight thing. Have you heard of this before, Tammy?
Not once again, this is where we're talking about Bob being, language rich,
Yeah.
because I can understand it when I read it, but to actually give it the word heart sight is, it's more profound. It's something I think that you can have sort of like a way to explain some of the things that he's talking about.
I find it to be a profound image. The whole
Yeah.
the whole idea of heart is a profound image. I mean, but think about this. We are just we're in the middle of the Olympics, and if you've ever watched any of the Olympics, you hear about um, athletes who have heart. You hear about people who have heart. You might hear about school spirit, schools that have heart, parishes that have heart. There's something about heart that says that points towards the authenticity of the body, whether it's the individual or the group. A team with heart. I was thinking about this image, this idea of heart sight. It's when we can see with our heart, a heart that is in tune with our Creator. That when we have that experience of seeing fully through that relationship with the mystery, with transcendent, with God, it changes how we deal with our life, and I think it changes how we interact with the lives of others. We have to be different if we're living with heart sight. And part of why I think this is important to me, and one of my favorite theologians is Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And I don't think this quote is in the book, but I found this quote and I've held on to it for a long time. Here's what he says. He says, love is the most universal, formidable, and mysterious of the cosmic forces. Love is the most formidable, universal, and mysterious of the cosmic forces. And why? This is McCarty, not Desjardins. I think why? Because I think love is at the core of living with heart sight. I do. I think that's where it comes from. And so the imagery of heart sight, of love, and how it impels us to live differently. Developing heart sight is part of that internal journey. It's the inner journey, but it gets reflected in the outer journey. It gets reflected in our relationships. That's a
I love
critical
that
piece for
you
me.
keep coming back to that concept of, that in my life, the fruits of my inward journey are also part of my external journey, that people can see, not just with the vocation that we choose, but the way that we choose to embrace our work, the way that we choose to embrace our ministry, or even our interactions with others, it's that those are fruits of a greater internal work that we're doing. And
Yeah.
how the inverse is also true, that when we are in a place where we're not in a good place in our internal journey, how that can affect all of these different parts of our life, that we can start having different character than we personally want.
Tammy, I think that's such an important point. I believe that if we took our discipleship seriously, if we took this whole idea about being in relationship with Jesus seriously, if we lived with heart sight, we have to be different. And practically speaking, it's how we are in our relationships. How do we treat the people around us? How do we treat our neighbor? How do we even define neighbor? How big is our definition of neighbor? And if you ever get curious about that, read the parable of the Good Samaritan carefully. Jesus defines what neighbor means, and it means the people on the margins, the people that we are least likely to interact with. But we should also be, and this gets kind of a little personal for all of us, we should be a different kind of an employee and an employer. That I think if we take this seriously, then that discipleship, that heart sight has to infiltrate all those different dimensions of our life. We can't compartmentalize and say, oh, that's my Sunday thing. But, Monday to Saturday, as one of my young people one time said in confirmation class, he said, Mr. Bob, I don't want to hear about it on Sunday if it doesn't make any difference Monday to Saturday. That's what he says. That was one of my high school kids. So I think it's true for all of us as adults. You can't compartmentalize the spiritual journey. It's like you got to be all in. It's kind of like rock climbing. You're all in. It's like, all right, I'm in. Let's do this. So I think that's what it means to live with heart sight. I'm all in.
I actually shared this with one of my teammates today because as you're talking about heart sight, one of the lines I liked there was, sometimes the hardest part of any journey is to give up the known for the unknown and just get started. Even when our inner voice has said go, it can be hard to follow. And then you go into the example of Bilbo Baggins, right, and The Hobbit, which is one of my favorites. And I think it's that, right? The heart sight should be then allowing us to be guided by the Spirit, right? And to become a different version of a better version of ourselves, right? And to be able to move forward into the unknown, knowing that it's really God who belays us, right? Even though we think that, I think you even mentioned this, right? I think we know things, but that's just our best guess about how things are going to go, right? We really don't. The day is unknown to us, even though we have plans for it. The journey's unknown to us, even though we think we know where we're going. Some of us might have a 5-year plan. I have like a 5-minute plan, and stuff.
Yeah.
But God's the one that really knows. And I think if we believe that we find that security in Him, and that we keep that heart sight, before us and as a priority, then we can move into spaces with greater security, right?
Yeah, and well, first off, I love the image of the Bilbo Baggins thing. I'm glad, Lisa, I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about Bilbo Baggins he's not going to do it on his own. It's Gandalf who pushes him into, and then that's when he says, I waited too long. I tried to ignore the call. I waited too long. I should have left. I think we all need Gandalfs in our life. We all need those people who say, all right, come on, let's go now. Let's get a move on here. Standing here is not working. Let's do something else. Whether they're a mentor, a coach, or somebody standing behind us with a sharp stick, just poking us in the butt. It's time to get moving. I think we need a Gandalf. Yeah. So, and oftentimes what they do is they remind us of the heart sight that maybe we forgot. That maybe because of circumstances in our life, the sufferings, the woundedness, the aloneness, the anxiety, things happen. Life happens, and if we're not careful, it can begin to suppress heart sight. And I am not saying that heart sight is only valid when things are good. I am saying though that sometimes those really tough moments make it harder to see. But I believe that by being intentional, I think our sight becomes stronger. That I think that what suffering does, it doesn't extinguish our heart sight. I think it expands our capacity for heart sight. It's my image is of Jesus on the cross. It really is about crucifixion. If Jesus is on the cross and he's only concerned about himself, crucifixion wins. But because Jesus on the cross, his perspective is outward to everyone else, to the world, resurrection wins. And I've often thought that our challenge, and that's what the church means by redemptive suffering. You don't suffer just for the sake of suffering. You suffer for the sake of solidarity with those who suffer. I'm part of that world. So that's why even suffering itself can strengthen our heart sight. And I know that sounds a little maybe counterintuitive, but I think it's true.
When my son was young, we had him memorize Philippians 4:13, and he would do it as he showed his muscles. And he'd be like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And it was just a real big motto for athletes. But I was telling Lisa, recently, the Lord's been drawing me back to Philippians 4:11 and 4:12. And if you look at those verses, you encounter 4:13 different as an adult. And 4:11 and 4:12 talk about, St. Paul says, I have known abundance and I have known scarcity. And then verse 12 talks about, I have known how to handle abundance and how to handle scarcity. And then the next line comes in and says, and I can do all things. And it's just like, it's what you're talking about. It's that beauty of saying, I have to recognize I don't only have this, this heart sight or this strength when I'm in abundance, but I have it when I'm in scarcity, and that's what propels us. And that's what makes our journey just look different and then you have this beautiful line here on page 24 where you say, but it is not without cost. Heart sight is often born of pain, risk, and most of all, love. And I think for some of us, it's easy to reflect on the love part. But when it comes down to it, the example that you used of Gandalf was very well aware of the danger and the risk. And I think having somebody that can journey with you that is not going to just share that, that concept of love, but that concept of risk and pain and be willing to still encourage you to move forward.
I think there are two things that stretch our heart. I think love and suffering. I think they're the things that stretch our heart and foster heart sight. And I heard it said that joy is suffering that has been worked through.
Mm.
Joy is suffering that has been worked through. It's the only way to explain why is it that some of those in our history, in our world today, maybe in our own circle of friends who suffer greatly are also joyful. How do they do that? How do people who suffer maintain that sense of joy? Joy is suffering that's been worked through. Love and suffering stretch our heart and allow us to love even more. And I think that's where heart sight is born, in that intersection of love and suffering. And one of the ways you know it's working, I think of the people in your life who just seem to radiate joy. Who are the people of joy in your life? Who do you count? And would people around you look at you and say, you're a person of joy? Yeah, I mean, wouldn't that be a wonderful compliment to have somebody say that to us, that I like being with you. You're a person of joy. Your joy is contagious. And I think that would be a sign, I think, that we're living with heart sight.
Right. My heart likes what it sees in your heart. So let's go to chapter 4, guys. This is going to be our final chapter for this particular episode, too. And we talk about 2 basic spiritual skills here. What are those skills and why do we need them?
By the time I got to chapter 4, I thought I was kind of laying out my premise, but I think there's a part of this like, all right, okay, Mr. Insightful, how do we do this? What does it look like practically? And which I think is a really fair question. I really think that's a great question. So, but my reading of spiritual traditions, not just Christian traditions, but across the board, that there are 2 fundamental skills, 2 fundamental spiritual skills: the ability to stop and the ability to see. In the Christian world, when we talk about stopping, we talk about Sabbath. That Sabbath is more than a day of the week. It's an attitude towards time. My experience tells me, in a Western culture, in our country, our culture encourages us to live fast, but not deep. We live fast, but not deep. I think every parent can identify with, oh my God, my schedule. I have to go here to there, and if you have more than one kid, you know that they're heading in opposite directions at the same time. I mean, we live fast. And even those families without children, in our work world, we live fast, but not deep. I think living fast leads to blindness. I think we can live so fast that we will not see the presence of God. We will blow right past it. We will miss the God who's always present because we're living so fast. I think it's probably impossible to be a person of justice if we live too fast, because we won't see the injustice. We won't see it. We won't see it. So this whole idea of learning how to stop, and my newest way of doing that, interesting enough, this is real new. I mean, actually, since the book came out, my front porch swing. This is my first year when I've had any luck attracting hummingbirds to my front yard. I have been 0 for like 20. I don't know. Just not my gift. And by the way, a hummingbird is a songbird that forgot the words. All right, I was just checking, see if you're listening. But I have
Oh,
to tell
Bob.
you, she'll edit that out. I know. But I've been starting every morning, having coffee and my spiritual reading on my front porch swing, 2.5 feet away from the hummingbird feeder, and they don't care that I'm there. I've been practicing how to stop because I spent so much of my life moving fast, and so I'm learning how to stop. That's why people go on retreat. We have to stop. That's why I think prayer is so important. We have to stop. We have to learn to stop because it causes blindness, which leads to the second skill. We have to learn how to see. St. Bonaventure writes about this, and he says that we have 3 sets of eyes. We have our physical eyes that we see the world. We have the eye of the mind. We know things. He says it's with the eye of the soul. It's with the eye of the soul that we see God, that we see the transcendent, we see mystery. It's about seeing. And I stumbled upon this concept actually at a youth conference. At the end of the youth conference, they had a big PowerPoint slideshow of all the things that happened during the conference. And when a slide would come up and the kids would recognize themselves, they would like burst into applause and get all excited. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, did they do that when they were in the moment? Probably not.
Mm.
Because what a slide does, what a photograph does, it takes a piece of reality and it freezes it. It takes a piece of time and freezes it, so we have time to contemplate what we see.
Wow.
It takes time. It's like I'll bet you've had the experience of looking at a piece of art over and over again. The art doesn't change. Our eyesight gets better. We start to see things we didn't see the first time around. So that whole idea of learning how to see, to really see. And so I think that idea of stopping and seeing are critical for the spiritual journey. I think they're critical skills for living with heart sight. And Jesus did it all the time. I mean, see, that's the thing. Jesus saw the kingdom all the time in everyone. That's what he did. And he kept saying to the apostles, the kingdom is within you. And I think he wanted to say, just open your eyes.
Mm.
Then I think he was going to say something else, but that's what he meant. He meant open your eyes. See. Are you paying attention here? Are you watching what I'm doing? Can you see what's going on? The kingdom's unfolding right here, right now. one of my favorite spiritual writers is Thomas Merton. And Merton has this whole passage in his book about standing on the corner of 4th and Walnut in Louisville, Kentucky. And he had a mystical experience. He saw everyone passing by. He says, I saw in them the fire of the Spirit. I saw in them the light of Christ. And I don't think they even saw it in themselves, but I saw it. And I wanted to tell them that do you see who you are? And and so and in fact, on the corner of 4th and Walnut, there's a plaque that says, Merton was here or something like that. I went to the corner of 4th and Walnut, nothing, nothing. I have to tell you, nothing. I had mystic envy, I guess. But, Mother Teresa, not until she saw the poor. She knew about them, knew they were there, but it's when she really saw them that her life changed, a radical change in direction and her service to the poor. Francis of Assisi with his stigmata, Bonaventure with his mystical experience on the same mountain that Francis was on. They saw. Well, think of the people in our life who just see. They just seem to see more than we see. They see it all. It's like we need people like that. This has really been fascinating for me. If you've ever been on a trip, like to a national park or anywhere that had a tour guide, and think about the difference between when we see something and when we have a tour guide who's telling us what we're seeing. You see more. I was with a tour guide at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Wow. I mean, he was pointing out stuff that I never would have seen. I never would have seen it on my own. I needed that tour guide. If you've ever been to an art museum with a docent who points out in the paintings and in the sculpture, they see more than we see. They see more. I've been at the Grand Canyon, the guy explaining what I was seeing. He saw more than I saw. That's what spiritual directors do. That's what spiritual mentors do. Spiritual coaches. That's what we do for each other. We help each other see what's all around us. It's all there. It's all there. It's Catholic theology. The world is shot through with God for those with eyes to see. And the fact that Jesus saw it in everyone, in the poor, the marginalized, the outcast, the suffering, the wounded. Jesus saw the kingdom in all of them, which is part of what gets him in trouble. That's a, you don't get crucified because you talk about peace and love and joy. You don't get crucified for that. Jesus got crucified because he redefined the kingdom. When Jesus said the first shall be last and the last shall be first, he really ticked off the first. He really did. And the problem here for us in our culture is that we're part of the first. We live in the wealthiest country in the world, and with that comes great responsibility. So we're part of the first. We got to be really careful. How do we see? Are we looking, and do we see this the way that Jesus saw? Well, that was a really big soapbox. That whole idea of stopping and seeing, I think is critical.
But I think it's something that, can be taught. I think about several instances in my own home. My husband's more of an anxious person. He always wants to know, like, what are we doing next? Like, what is the next thing that's happening? And I am, we joke, I'm like a marinator, So it's funny because when the kids have something exciting that happens, they'll tell him this is the exciting thing. And then he always says, go tell your mom. And it's really funny because what he means is go be in front of your mom, because when you tell your mom that same statement, she's going to want to go back with you and show you how the Lord worked that situation out for you. And she's going to take it back for you. I can't do that. I'm just going to celebrate this moment with you. But, I think it was a profound experience I had once with the Holy Spirit, where the Holy Spirit was showing me in my life that I was, the Bible story of like the 10 lepers. And there was the one that came back and was able to say, like, look what you've done for me. And, being able to say to my kids, hey, hold on a second. You've been praying for this for a few weeks now. Let's really work this back. And let's really look at this differently before we just move on to the next thing on your intentions list. Like, let's marinate on this for a bit, because it's not that the Lord's going to do more for you because you have eyes to see. It's you're going to see things differently,
Yeah.
even looking at the next thing on your list.
And Tammy, I keep calling it a spiritual skill on purpose. Sometimes in church work, we talk about spiritual practices like going to mass, prayer, fasting, adoration, service, and justice. Uh, I call it a skill because I think they're learnable.
Mhm.
Skills are behaviors. And to learn to stop and to learn to see are behaviors that help us be more in touch with the transcendent. And it's a skill. And a real simple way to begin learning the skill is every once in a while, just pause and ask yourself the question, when I look with my spiritual eyes, what do I see?
Hmm.
If we just if we just walked around with that question on a card and kept it in our pocket, and every time we put our hand in our pocket, we felt that and we paused, we would begin to see differently. So two of the places where I practiced that skill. My first one, earlier in my career, I spent a lot of time in airports, a lot of time in airports, and a lot of time waiting for planes. So I had a lot of time to stop.
Right.
And so, but I would walk around the airport and I would say to myself, when I look with spiritual eyes, what do I see? Where do I see the kingdom breaking through? And I have to tell
Hmm.
you, when you start with that perspective, you will be surprised at what you see. You will see more than you thought. You will see stuff that you were missing. You go, I see it. I see that. I see that. Um, so whether it's, for me, it was airport terminals, but shopping malls, walking around your neighborhood, in a park, to ask yourself the question, when I look with spiritual eyes, what do I see? We will start to see differently. This may not be like the best thing for anybody but me. But after communion, I know we're supposed to pray and reflect. Well, I don't do any of that. I watch the people walking up to communion and walking back. Because when I look with my spiritual eyes, I see the kingdom, all shapes and sizes. I don't know these people, but I know each one of them is a story. Each one of them has a history of, of joy and suffering, um, hopes fractured. And they're bringing all that. They're bringing it to communion. They're bringing it to Eucharist. And when they turn and they're walking back, I'm thinking the Jesus within them. I hope that Jesus within them is healing their stories,
Hmm.
healing their hearts. Um, and so when I look with spiritual eyes, I see the kingdom. Every time I'm at mass, I watch those people walking up and coming back. It's like there's something about that. But do you see? But that makes it a skill. And the more we do it, we will do it all the time. And there's something wonderful. The next time you're at a meal with your friends and you're just having a great time with your friend, catch yourself and say, so when I look with spiritual eyes, what do I see? I see the kingdom breaking through right here with my friends over dinner. This is joyful. This is Eucharistic with a small e. It
Yeah.
is. It's
Amen.
sacramental with
Yeah.
a small s.
And I think also, seeing that in what Sister Miriam Heidelin calls, she talks that we each have like our own joyful mysteries, our own sorrowful mysteries, our own glorious mysteries. I think it's a way we could look with our heart sight, right? And look and see. I think if we can even, not just in those joyous moments, but in our suffering and our sorrowful moments. I remember, for example, it was my mom's birthday. And my mom passed away. Right before I got married, so over 13 years ago now. And um, and it was her birthday, and we were in the ER with my dad. My dad had a very unfortunate accident that day that was caused by some of the people that were his caretakers. And as we were there, I thought something that my therapist had said, and it was that how we could approach those situations in our life. I mean, I could just be like, we're back in the hospital again, and just be dreadful. We're in the ER. What's going to happen? They're going to do this X-ray. What if he has brain bleeding? Da da da. But I thought we can celebrate my mom's birthday and we can still be here and be present. And this can still be a moment where God breaks through in the ER, where we can not look at this dreadfully. So I think a lot of it is how we bring our own sight to it. But there's so many more things that we could talk about, guys. Like this, it's so hard to contain them. But it is time for us to wrap up the podcast and to say, go back. There's going to be those questions listed for you to journal about for each one of these chapters. If you have the book, if you don't, go grab it, and stuff. It'd be awesome if you could follow along with us too. It's just been a joy, right, guys, to just be talking about this.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And I am just so appreciative of the opportunity, really, to just reflect back on the book and on my own spiritual journey and try to put words on there that may make sense for somebody else. Yeah, I hope. I'd like to see it be like a trail guide for people on their path. I think it'd be a great use of that. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great opportunity for anyone who has had a book in their hand and wanted to probe the author's thoughts a little bit more on the various chapters that they're reading. So I think it's a gift for our listeners and for your readers as well to have you kind of narrow in a little bit more on some of these chapters and to give us some key points. So thank you so much for that, Bob.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
And thanks you guys for joining us on this great adventure of the Heart of a Disciple podcast, a source of nourishment, renewal, and restoration for your spirit to keep moving forward in faith on the journey. So may your heart remain open so that God can abundantly fill us. We'll see you back for episode 3, where we'll cover the next couple of chapters. Stay tuned.
Hello, I'm Paul McMahon, the president and publisher at Paulist Press, where we strive to publish books that will enrich the spirituality of our readers at the intersection of faith and culture. On behalf of the press, we are delighted to be the publisher of this book, The Heart of a Disciple by Bob McCarty, and to sponsor the engaging series of podcasts based on the book. The Heart of a Disciple encourages readers to listen to their hearts and to nurture their spiritual lives as they grow in discipleship and minister to others on their journey in faith. We hope that you will enjoy these podcasts. You can purchase a copy of The Heart of a Disciple on our website at paulistpress.com. Thank you.